Bishop T.D. Jakes, the leader of Dallas megachurch, the Potter's House, announced today that he will be stepping down. Jakes is a world-renowned pastor. Remember, he suffered a heart attack.
Bishop T.D. Jakes stepped down, and the church world felt it instantly. Now, at 63, Juanita Bynum is speaking in a way few expected. Careful, sharp, and hard to ignore. This isn't about a simple exit or a quiet handoff. There's a deeper tension behind the scenes tied to a specific pressure inside modern ministry that most people only whisper about. One overlooked moment hints at how image, power, and accountability collide. What did she see up close, and why choose now to say anything at all? The sudden step down. When Bishop T.D. Jakes announced he would step down from his longtime leadership role, and the Christian community felt the jolt immediately. For decades, Jakes delivered commanding sermons and led a ministry that seemed unstoppable, so the resignation sparked more questions than answers. Official statements sounded calm, but many sensed a deeper story, one shaped by private strain and challenges that had been building for years. The timing bothered people most. Why now? Jakes had become a constant presence, and his stamina made stepping aside feel unthinkable. Rumors rushed in, yet few spoke plainly about the pressure of carrying a public image that must never crack. This did not look like a simple retirement or a quiet handoff. It felt like a collision with the hard realities of leadership under a modern spotlight. Behind the scenes, those close to Jakes pointed to a weight that rarely showed from the pulpit. He built the Potter's House into a global force, both a beacon and a burden. Leading a massive congregation while sustaining media reach, conferences, and non-stop expectations blurred the line between personal faith and public performance. As the ministry expanded, demands grew too, not only from supporters, but from the system that rewards size, visibility, and constant output. Alongside public success ran a quieter battle, the cost of celebrity in church culture. Many high-profile leaders walk a tightrope between authenticity and image, and for Jakes, that balance appeared to grow more fragile. The unspoken requirement to be flawless, to lead with endless energy, steady confidence, and no visible weakness, left little room for honesty about fatigue, doubt, or pain. Over time, the pressure of being unbreakable can become a prison, and the strain stays hidden until something gives. It was in this atmosphere that Juanita Bynum's voice surfaced, cutting through years of silence about what might have been happening behind the curtain. Her remarks suggested that Jakes's decision was connected to issues more layered than the public had been told. Many expected a graceful exit, but her words hinted at something heavier, a reckoning tied to spiritual strain, cultural tension, and long-standing pressures quietly piling up. Even without a full explanation, the moment felt bigger than one leader stepping aside. It reflected wider stress points inside modern ministry, where platforms get larger, branding gets sharper, and vulnerability can feel risky. The shine of sold-out events and best-selling books can hide the exhaustion that comes with being treated like a symbol instead of a person. In that sense, Jakes's departure became a sign of hidden costs, what it takes to hold a near-mythic role for decades. Speculation intensified as people tried to grasp what the change meant for the Potter's House and for spiritual leadership itself. Could someone so influential be stepping back because the system became too heavy, even a system he helped build? The question lingered, pushing many to look beyond headlines and toward the deeper forces shaping church leadership today. That uncertainty created room for Bynum's perspective. Her decision to speak after a long, quiet stretch suggested she believed the public conversation had missed something essential. What she pointed to wasn't just about one resignation. It was about a ministry culture that often protects appearances and discourages the uncomfortable truth. As the story continues, one thing is clear. The real narrative wasn't finished. It was only beginning to surface. Transitioning from the shock of a sudden exit the focus moves to the woman who rose alongside Bishop Jakes, whose voice would become critical in revealing the deeper tensions behind the scenes. Juanita Bynum's rise. Juanita Bynum's journey to becoming a spiritual powerhouse is inseparable from the influence and platform provided by Bishop T.D. Jakes. Early in her career, it was during one of Jakes's major conferences that she delivered her electrifying sermon titled "No More Sheets," a message that resonated deeply with millions of women. This moment launched her into the spotlight, marking the beginning of a significant partnership between two dynamic leaders within the Pentecostal movement. Bynum's ministry was known for its raw honesty and emotional intensity, qualities that quickly set her apart. Her fearless approach to speaking on issues often considered taboo brought a fresh voice to Christian circles that craved authenticity. Unlike many contemporaries, she refused to soften her message, advocating for spiritual freedom and emotional healing with unapologetic candor. This boldness endeared her to a devoted following, but also created friction in an environment that often prizes decorum. Her rise was not merely about celebrity, but about a shared vision that aligned closely with Jakes's mission to inspire and uplift marginalized voices, especially women. Together, they crafted a movement that combined spiritual empowerment with a bold public presence, transforming religious conferences into transformative experiences for many attendees. This partnership symbolized a synergy of passion and influence that shaped a generation of churchgoers. Despite the public unity, Juanita Bynum's path also highlighted subtle differences in approach and philosophy that would later surface as points of tension. Where Jakes sometimes leaned toward measured discretion and maintaining a polished image, Bynum championed transparency and confronting uncomfortable truths head-on. Her unwillingness to compromise on these values set her apart and occasionally placed her at odds with more cautious leadership circles. Over the years they worked together, Bynum was always an interesting but controversial figure who constantly critiqued the comforts of celebrity ministry culture. She was a preacher not afraid to criticize such vices as gluttony and vanity. And besides, she insisted on being and telling the truth that often provoked the religious authorities. Thus, her role of being both the insider and the critic gave her a special position from which to observe the changing relations around the Jakes leadership. Besides, Bynum's preaching was just a part of her influence. She became the representative of the new generation of female leaders in Pentecostalism, who dared to question and dismantle the old power structures. Her appearing on the world's biggest stages was a sign of something more significant happening in the church, as the once silenced and invisible voices started demanding both visibility and respect. This moment in history was a great challenge, as well as a great opportunity, providing tension along with the change. Though Jakes was the one who set up the stage, Juanita's ministry had its own antonym, one that was exposed to the public, emotionally honest, and refusing to hide behind struggle. Overt and personal authenticity were her leading characteristics, contrary to the system that now and then preferred branding and controlled narratives. Their relationship was not simple, and this divergence was a sign of the issue with them. Bynum, when she thought of her rise, was undoubtedly the church's evolving celebrity culture beneficiary and, at the same time, its challenger. Her advancement, or rise, brought out the possibilities and hazards of high-profile spiritual leadership, and thus, the delicate balance between influence and integrity was highlighted. Soon, this duality would play its part in the shaping of the next chapter of their interconnected tales with the underlying currents. Transitioning from Juanita's rise and growing influence, the narrative deepens into the tensions that silently simmered between her and Bishop Jakes, tensions that would ultimately shape the unfolding drama. Growing tensions. Beneath the surface of public admiration and mutual respect, Juanita Bynum and Bishop T.D. Jakes harbored differing views that created an undercurrent of tension spanning years. At the heart of their divide were contrasting philosophies on ministry, accountability, and public transparency, a rift that was never openly aired but felt sharply within their inner circles. While Jakes valued discretion and cultivating a unified, carefully managed public image, Bynum insisted that uncomfortable truths should never be hidden. This philosophical divide touched on deeper concerns about the trajectory of megachurch culture itself. Juanita voiced worries about the rise of celebrity pastors living lavish lifestyles, congregations giving generously, sometimes blindly, and conferences turning more toward entertainment than genuine spiritual restoration. Her critiques suggested that a growing celebrity culture risked corrupting the soul of ministry, a warning few dared to acknowledge openly. Sources close to both leaders confirmed that despite their professional relationship, their personal rapport became complicated by these value clashes. Their interactions, while courteous in public, were marked by increasingly divergent priorities behind the scenes. The tensions reflected broader debates within the church about authenticity versus image, substance versus spectacle. Bynum's vocal critiques often unsettled those invested in the status quo. She challenged the idea that spiritual leaders should be idolized as flawless icons, pointing instead to the pressures such expectations placed on ministry heads. This stance put her at odds with a culture that preferred polished presentations over raw, vulnerable truth. At the same time, Jakes was caught in the delicate position of balancing immense public expectations with the realities of leadership fatigue and personal sacrifice. Upholding a flawless persona became both a shield and a prison, restricting authentic expression and complicating relationships with outspoken figures like Bynum. Increasingly, insiders saw their differing visions as emblematic of a wider crisis in church leadership: how to honor spiritual calling while resisting the trappings of fame and institutional growth at any cost. The friction between them was a manifestation of this larger struggle. The growing tensions also illuminate why Bynum's candid response to Jakes's departure was so striking. Years of silence gave way to a voice unafraid to reveal the spiritual and cultural challenges that had long been sidelined. Her words resonated not as personal attacks, but as clarion calls for change. These underlying conflicts help explain the complexity behind what appeared to many as a straightforward resignation. They reveal the pressures and disagreements that shape leadership decisions in a faith community grappling with modern celebrity dynamics. Recognizing these tensions deepens our understanding of the real story, one about faith, power, accountability, and the longing for an authentic ministry that serves beyond the spotlight. The unresolved struggles between Juanita Bynum and Bishop T.D. Jakes set the tone for a wider examination of the culture they were both part of, a culture that would soon come under bold critique. Critique of celebrity culture. Juanita Bynum's candid remarks extend beyond Bishop T.D. Jakes, as she offers a sweeping critique of celebrity culture within modern ministry. She highlights a system where spiritual leaders are elevated to near-idol status, creating a climate that prioritizes image over authenticity. In this culture, perfection is demanded, not just as an expectation, but as an unspoken rule, pushing leaders to embody an unbreakable persona. This pressure, she argues, develops a dissonance between public perception and private reality, where vulnerability is sacrificed for the sake of maintaining a flawless facade. Her observations point to a broader phenomenon where ministries grow into brands and leaders become symbols rather than servants. The shift toward spectacle, marketing, and entertainment risks overshadowing the foundational spiritual mission of these communities. Bynum critiques lavish conferences and mega-pastors living like moguls, often funded by congregations that give without question. This commercialized approach, she warns, blurs the lines between genuine ministry and corporate enterprise, diluting the true calling. Juanita's concerns resonate because they address an uncomfortable truth. The prioritization of growth and expansion often eclipses the well-being of both leaders and followers. The relentless pursuit of fame and fortune within the church can lead to burnout and spiritual emptiness, a hidden cost rarely discussed openly. This dynamic encourages leaders to guard their images rigorously, making transparency nearly impossible. Her critique is also a reflection on accountability. She questions how spiritual systems can allow unchecked power and influence to concentrate without sufficient oversight. The celebrity pastor model, she suggests, creates vulnerabilities not just for leaders but for entire congregations who place immense trust in individuals rather than communities or shared values. This misplaced focus can lead to disillusionment and cynicism when leaders falter or step away. Bynum's message is a good one for the church and the leadership to challenge which character traits are the real ones in leading, ones that are dependent on humility, truth, and mutual care, instead of being a show and perfection. She begs the church to unbuild the pedestal that pushes the pastors too high, and she speaks of the need for the real spirituality that accepts human weaknesses. Her thoughts suggest that the religious community should regain the ministry as a relationship, not a brand. This critique also includes the emotional burden of the leaders who have to be always accessible and, at the same time, untouchable, relatable, and yet perfect. The reproaches thus created isolate the environment, and the leaders might suffer in silence, afraid that any sign of weakness might be a threat to their ministry. Bynum's honesty is the one that breaks the silence, and her words are the ones that make the light shine on the costs of living up to those realistically high expectations. Furthermore, her reflections imply that the Christian community needs to undergo a cultural change process to deal with the consequences for the ministry, which was driven by the desire for fame. The attractiveness of big platforms and celebrity status may turn the whole act of serving and healing into something other than the main goal. Bynum's eye-opening is a reminder to the church that power and influence should never take the place of integrity or real service. In the end, this is a wake-up call for not only individual leaders but for the whole Christian community to rethink the practice and perception of ministry in a branding and media-fueled age. It's a call back to the heart of spiritual leadership, which is one based on truth, vulnerability, and purpose that lasts. Her critique opens doors to finding the deep personal and systemic challenges that are really at the root of T.D. Jakes' resignation headline. As the harsh realities of celebrity culture come into focus, attention shifts naturally to the immense pressures that perfection demands, making it clear why such tolls shape both leaders and their decisions. The pressure of perfection. The expectation that spiritual leaders remain flawless figures creates a suffocating pressure few outsiders fully grasp. Juanita Bynum articulates how this relentless demand for perfection can isolate leaders, forcing them into roles where their humanity is often hidden or denied. The public image becomes a mask, and maintaining it requires constant vigilance, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. This tension between persona and person fosters an environment ripe for burnout and crisis. Bynum explains that leaders like Bishop Jakes are expected to be unbreakable, invulnerable, and perpetually inspiring, standards that no individual can sustain indefinitely. The weight of these expectations often leads to emotional strain and exhaustion, a reality concealed beneath the polished veneer most audiences see. The paradox is stark. The higher the pedestal, the more precarious the leader's stability. She points out that this pressure extends beyond personal well-being to affect the very authenticity of ministry. When leaders prioritize image preservation, it can stunt spiritual growth and honest connection within their communities. Followers may receive curated versions of faith rather than raw, healing truths, ultimately undermining the purpose of ministry itself. Juanita also highlights the loneliness that comes with leadership in today's celebrity-driven environment. The isolation stems not only from the sheer demands of the role, but from a culture that discourages authentic vulnerability. Leaders fear that showing weakness might diminish their influence or credibility, forcing them into silent battles with burnout and doubt. This loneliness can deepen the divide between their public persona and personal reality. She reflects on the toll this takes on emotional health. Stress, anxiety, and spiritual depletion become common yet concealed struggles among high-profile pastors. These pressures compound over time, leading some leaders to question their path or step away entirely, as was the case with Bishop Jakes. Bynum's insights underscore how the pursuit of perfection is often the tipping point toward crisis. The expectation to constantly perform at an extraordinary level also disrupts a leader's ability to rest and recover. The dance of endless public engagements, deliveries, and appearances leaves little room for the restoration necessary to sustain long-term spiritual and mental health. Such a relentless pace is unsustainable, no matter how devoted or gifted the leader. Bynum calls attention to the broader implications for the church community when leaders reach their limits. The fallout not only affects the individual, but also shakes the faith and trust of thousands who depend on them. Recognizing this interconnected impact is crucial for developing healthier models of leadership that nurture rather than exhaust. Her perspective invites spiritual communities to reconsider how they support their leaders, advocating for structures that encourage honesty, accountability, and holistic care. This shift could transform how ministry is lived and experienced, moving away from idolization toward genuine partnership in spiritual growth. Understanding this pressure of perfection provides vital context for the decisions Bishop Jakes made and the new direction called for by voices like Juanita Bynum's. Faith leadership in the modern age faces profound challenges requiring courage and change. As the conversation about burnout and image pressures deepens, it naturally opens the door to exploring the breaking point that led to Jakes's departure and the urgent call for renewal within spiritual leadership. The breaking point. The relentless pressures of public expectation and personal sacrifice eventually reached a breaking point for Bishop T.D. Jakes. Years of sustaining a demanding schedule, maintaining a flawless image, and navigating the complexities of leading a vast congregation left him vulnerable to emotional and spiritual exhaustion. This breaking point was not sudden, but the culmination of weariness concealed beneath a polished exterior, a reality that only those closest to him could perceive. The facade of unshakable confidence masked deep internal struggles. Juanita Bynum's revelations suggest that this moment of collapse was as much about systemic failure as individual strain. The demands of celebrity ministry culture leave little room for rest or authentic renewal, and leaders often find themselves isolated amid the pressures to perform. For Jakes, the weight of maintaining a perfect persona became increasingly incompatible with the person behind the pulpit. These unresolved tensions drove him to reconsider the sustainability of his leadership path. His decision to step down, while shocking to many, was a profound act of self-preservation. It reflected an acknowledgement that continuing under such strain would only erode the core purpose of his ministry. The breaking point was not just about stepping away from responsibilities, but about reclaiming authenticity and mental health. In this light, his resignation emerges less as surrender and more as a necessary transformation. Bynum's candid critique illuminates the broader context around this crisis. She points out that burnout among spiritual leaders is frequently suppressed, its signs disguised by the continued push for expansion and success. The public often only witnesses the aftermath, the resignation or retreat, but rarely the invisible battles waged over years. Jakes's journey is a case study of this hidden struggle. The breaking point highlights as well the fact that the messaging of a person's character through the public ministry may make the leader more vulnerable. When a leader's value is connected with the success and image of his or her ministry, the failure or exhaustion is equated with a personal flaw. This brutal situation keeps mental health issues and real spiritual development within church leadership areas unspoken. The withdrawal of Jakes is going to create a shift in this pattern. Speaking of this new reality, Juanita stresses the pressing necessity of changing the ministry culture structurally. The leaders of the churches need to be supported in a manner that takes into account their human limits and promotes honesty so that they can work in the church without endangering their health. Only when such transformation takes place can the flourishing of ministries be both sustainable and genuine. The quick temper that brought about Jakes' resignation is indicative of the systemic defects in the church, which are not only his weaknesses. Awareness of this fact will be instrumental in switching the discourse from accusations to healing and renovation. The views of Bynum put the entire Christian community in a challenging position where it has to deal with these painful realities, but with compassion and bravery. The breaking point situation was, so to speak, a necessary stoppage, which at the same time, very candidly, opened the way to reset what the faithful leadership should be like in the day and age of renowned pastors and vast ministry empires. This is an invitation to see vulnerability as a power, not as a defeat. Grasping the situation gives one a solid ground to consider the uplifting message Juanita is bringing about the renewal and authenticity in ministry. As the weight of burnout and broken facades is acknowledged, the focus turns toward Juanita Bynum's call for a return to a genuine ministry grounded in spiritual health rather than image. A call for authenticity. Juanita Bynum's message amid the fallout is clear and uncompromising. Ministry must be rooted in authenticity, not the demands of celebrity culture. She urges leaders and communities alike to shift from valuing polished brands toward embracing spiritual health as the foundation of all ministry work. This call challenges the prevailing norms and invites a deeper reflection on what it means to truly serve. Her advocacy rests on the conviction that spiritual leaders are human beings first, flawed, vulnerable, and in need of care. Bynum stresses that acknowledging this humanity is essential for creating environments where leaders can thrive without fear of judgment or loss of status. Authentic ministry, she suggests, acknowledges struggle and embraces transparency as a source of strength. This call also asks churches to reconsider their role in supporting leaders. Rather than idolizing pastors, congregations should cultivate communities that prioritize mutual accountability, rest, and healing. Bynum's vision includes systems that safeguard leaders from isolation and burnout by fostering genuine relationships and shared leadership. Such a model encourages sustainable growth without sacrificing depth. In pushing for authenticity, Juanita critiques the obsession with growth metrics and media presence that often dictate ministry success today. She challenges the assumption that bigger conferences, more followers, or impressive branding necessarily equal spiritual vitality. Her insistence is on quality over quantity, substance over spectacle. Her message resonates because it comes from lived experience, as someone who navigated the highs and lows of ministry fame herself. Bynum's words are not theoretical critiques, but grounded reflections from a place of love for the church and those who lead it. She calls for courage to break free from cultural expectations and reclaim ministry as a sacred human endeavor. Honesty and vulnerability become cornerstones of this renewed approach. Bynum encourages leaders to share their journeys openly, fostering deeper connections with their congregations and allowing healing to flow through shared stories. This transparency enhances resilience and counters the loneliness endemic in many leadership roles. She also highlights the importance of focusing on the true purpose of ministry, the transformation of lives and the fulfillment of callings, rather than the expansion of an empire or brand. This refocus recenters ministry on its spiritual mission, aligning leadership with service rather than status. Juanita's call extends beyond pastors to all involved in the spiritual community, urging a collective reimagining of church culture that honors humanity and prioritizes well-being. This holistic vision offers hope for a future where ministry flourishes without sacrificing the leader's soul. Her reflections close a circle, from the breaking point to the possibility of renewal, reminding the Christian world that authenticity, though demanding, is the path to lasting impact and genuine faith. As this plea for authenticity resonates, it naturally opens a reflection on the legacy Bishop Jakes leaves behind and the lessons that can guide future generations of spiritual leaders. Legacy and reflection. Bishop T.D. Jakes' decision to step down marks the end of a significant chapter in modern Christian leadership. But it also sparks questions about what legacy he leaves behind. Jakes built the Potter's House into a global phenomenon, influencing millions through his sermons, books, and conferences. His impact on contemporary faith and culture is undeniable. Yet, as Juanita Bynum's reflections suggest, legacy is not solely about the size of an empire, but about the lives changed and the authenticity of the calling that fueled it. His departure invites a closer look at how spiritual empires sustain themselves when their founding figures withdraw. The challenge lies in preserving the core mission in the face of inevitable leadership transitions. Jakes' legacy raises important questions about what remains when the man behind the movement steps away, and how the ministry adapts without losing its original spirit. Juanita warns that too often, ministries become brands that outgrow their leaders, creating systems that can neglect the spiritual health of those within. The Potter's House, with its expansive reach, is no exception. It serves as a cautionary example of what can happen when branding eclipses calling, leaving leaders and their communities vulnerable to burnout and disillusionment. At the heart of this reflection is the call to redefine what a true ministry legacy should be. Juanita challenges the church to value depth over breadth, focusing on nurturing spiritual growth rather than mere numerical expansion. The most enduring legacy, she insists, is not found in buildings or conference attendance, but in transformed hearts and faithful service. Discussions around Jakes' legacy and the need for spiritual leaders to be more accountable and cared for also go hand in hand. The departure of Jakes shows that even the most influential personalities cannot escape the diseases of the church organization that threaten its health. The church must strive to be a society where such leaders are able to develop their potential and become more than just their public persona, and where restoration and sustainable mission are the priorities. At the same time, Jakes' legacy lags the church's leadership maturity like a mirror. It shows a new era when pastors have to juggle the weights of their power with those of their weaknesses, their aspirations with their spiritual disciplines. Finding this balance is one of the pivotal factors for raising ministries that not only survive, but also grow through periods of suffering and trial. The early warning given by Juanita's comments is not limited to the church, but applies to all leaders. Popularity and fortune can be very costly if one does not set limits, and if one does not remain true to oneself. The most exhaustive portrayals of the dark side of the Catholic Church have been written. The Church has lost a lot of its legitimacy because of the people who had claimed to be its leaders. However, the world and the Church need these honest and humble leaders to be in the limelight again. When the Christian world thinks of the future of the Potter's House together with other megachurches, the talk is for a future where both the legacy and the renewal are honored. Jakes' resignation is a step towards the redefinition of spiritual leadership in terms of its understanding and its practice. Juanita Bynum's words offer a rare look behind the curtain of one of Christianity's most iconic leaders. T.D. Jakes stepping down is a reminder that ministry is bigger than fame. It's about faith, truth, and the weight leadership carries. If this gave you a new perspective, tap like, share it with someone, and subscribe for more real stories that shape the culture. And don't stop here. Check out the next video on your screen now for the next piece of this conversation.